The hangar vibrated with the low hum of machinery and murmurs of expectation. Floodlights glared off polished steel floors as senior officers, engineers, and a handful of senators' aides gathered to witness the debut of the Army's most advanced training system, the Omega Protocol. Through the side door stepped Corporal Leah Monroe. Her uniform sleeve was torn. A faint bruise shadowed her cheekbone, but her eyes, calm, gray, unflinching, didn't waver. The laughter began before she even reached the center of the floor. "Hope she signed the waiver," Sergeant Major Briggs muttered, loud enough for the nearby officers to hear. A ripple of amusement spread through the crowd. Ethan Voss, the senator's aide, leaned toward his colleague with a smirk. A stiff breeze could knock her over. Leah heard every word, yet she kept walking, steady, composed. Up on the observation platform, General Robert Hensley folded his arms, studying her in silence. He didn't laugh. There was something in her posture, the subtle balance of her feet, the way her shoulders stayed loose under scrutiny, something he recognized but couldn't yet place. The air crackled with tension, the whir of combat drones powering up behind the glass. The test was about to begin. No one knew that by the end of it, the laughter would die, and history would remember this bruised soldier's name. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? The prep room smelled faintly of oil, dust, and ozone, the scent of machines that had seen too much testing and not enough rest. Corporal Leah Monroe stood beneath the overhead lights as a technician tightened the simulator harness around her torso. The straps dug into bruises that hadn't yet faded, each one a quiet reminder of the weeks before, of the crucible. She winced only once, briefly, then exhaled through her nose, centering herself. The walls around her hummed as power surged into the Omega Protocol simulator, the military's most ambitious project yet. A real-time adaptive combat AI designed to test human response under battlefield conditions. Colonel Travis Boyd paced near the observation window, his voice projecting confidence to the small crowd of VIPs and analysts. "This system," he declared, gesturing toward the chamber beyond the glass, "learns in real time. It adapts, improvises, and evaluates faster than any drill sergeant ever could. And today, Corporal Monroe will demonstrate its full operational range." A faint murmur rippled through the observers. Sergeant Major Cole Briggs leaned back against a crate, arms crossed, a smirk carved across his weathered face. "Just hope our volunteer doesn't break a nail," he said under his breath. The comment earned a few quiet chuckles. Leah didn't react. She adjusted the strap on her glove with deliberate precision, each movement controlled, efficient, the way she did everything. Ethan Voss, the senator's aide, scribbled something into his notepad. "She looks like she wandered in from the admin office," he whispered to a colleague. "What's she gonna teach us? Filing techniques under fire?" They laughed softly, as if she couldn't hear them. But she could. She heard every word. And instead of flinching, she checked the angle of her rifle sling, her breathing even. Colonel Boyd gestured for quiet. "Corporal Monroe, step forward." Leah moved to the center of the prep room, boots striking the metal floor with quiet authority. She met the colonel's eyes, not defiant, not submissive, just steady. "Ma'am, this simulation will evaluate reflex, accuracy, decision-making, and adaptability under variable threat pressure," Boyd explained, his tone rehearsed. "The AI will respond to you as it would in live combat." "Understood?" "Yes, sir," Leah said simply. Briggs folded his arms tighter, muttering, "She doesn't even blink." Leah glanced once at the simulator door, a thick steel panel that would soon seal her inside, then looked back to the colonel. "Permission to begin?" Boyd blinked, surprised by the directness. "Granted." As she turned toward the door, the overhead light caught the side of her face. The bruise along her jawline had turned from deep purple to a fading amber, but it was still visible. Nobody asked where it came from. Most assumed it was clumsiness, an accident during training. No one guessed it was earned, deliberately, during a selection course so secret its name was only spoken once, in whispers, the Crucible. Inside her mind, Leah replayed the lessons of those nights, rain pelting the dirt. 50 pounds of gear strapped to her shoulders. 12-mile marches through mud while instructors screamed until their voices gave out. And when it was over, when others collapsed, she had stood silently, because she'd already learned that true endurance made no sound. Back in the present, the tech officer, Captain Rachel Sloan, performed final checks on the console. "Vitals stable," she said softly. "Neural link clear. Heart rate steady." She glanced at Leah. "You're calm for someone about to face a machine that thinks faster than you do." Leah offered a faint smile. "It's only faster until it hesitates." Sloan paused. The tone was quiet, not cocky. Just certain. On the observation deck above, General Robert Hensley leaned against the railing, watching. His uniform jacket hung open at the collar, his face lined from decades in the field. He'd seen hundreds of soldiers, brave, arrogant, terrified, but Leah Monroe didn't fit any category. She stood differently, knees bent slightly, weight distributed evenly, shoulders loose but aligned. It was a posture that said she could pivot, strike, or disappear in a breath. He narrowed his eyes. That stance. He'd seen it once before, in a file-stamped Tier 1 Spectre, but that was impossible. Spectre was classified, dissolved years ago. Nobody outside the old circles even used that codename anymore. From below, Ethan Voss's voice cut through the hum. "I still don't get it," he muttered. "Why her? You've got entire Ranger battalions itching to test this system, and we pick her?" Briggs chuckled. "Senator's kid probably wants good optics, looks inclusive, you know." Voss laughed, nodding. "Exactly." Soft power. The word stung, but Leah didn't let it show. She'd heard worse. She'd been underestimated her entire career, by officers who thought quiet meant weak, by peers who mistook restraint for fear. Her fingers brushed over the side pocket of her gear, where a small, worn notebook rested. The cover was faded, the pages dog-eared from years of use. Scrawled across the front in black ink were 6 words: "Targets aren't enemies, they're equations." That phrase wasn't just a mantra, it was how she thought. Every situation could be solved. Every pattern broken down, every problem answered with precision. General Hensley watched her close the notebook, slip it back into her pocket, and tighten the final strap. "Strange," he murmured to himself. "Most soldiers try to look strong before a test. She's already accepted she doesn't have to." He straightened as Colonel Boyd announced through the comm system, "Simulation will commence in 3 minutes. All personnel clear the prep zone." As the others stepped back, Leah remained still. The faint hum of the simulator grew louder, deep, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. She looked toward the observation deck, locking eyes briefly with Hensley. He saw no nerves, no bravado. Just readiness. Briggs couldn't resist one last jab. "Don't get lost in there, Corporal. AI won't hold your hand." Leah glanced his way, expression unreadable. "Neither will I, Sergeant Major." The silence afterward was deafening. Even Boyd hid a faint grin. "Proceed," he ordered. Leah stepped forward, the simulator door sliding open with a hydraulic hiss. Cold air spilled out, tinged with the scent of ozone and metal. She paused at the threshold, her reflection flickering in the glass panel, bruised, calm, resolute. Behind her, whispers buzzed through the crowd. "Who is she? Where'd she train? She doesn't look Special Forces." She ignored them all, walking inside as the door sealed shut behind her. Up above, Hensley exhaled slowly. "Something tells me we're about to see more than a simulation," he said quietly. Voss smirked, arms crossed. "Or a very short one." Down in the chamber, Leah adjusted her headset. Her pulse remained steady. The world outside the glass disappeared, replaced by the simulated ruins of an urban war zone. Her lips barely moved as she whispered to herself, words that no microphone caught. "Ready, sir." The lights dimmed. The Omega Protocol roared to life. When the countdown hit 0, the lights inside the chamber dimmed to an eerie red. The hum of the Omega Protocol deepened, and holographic walls flickered into existence. An urban combat zone, fractured and half-lit by burning debris. Leah Monroe stepped forward, her boots echoing softly against the metal floor that now resembled cracked pavement. From the observation deck, the crowd leaned forward. Every breath, every whisper seemed amplified through the speakers. Simulation Phase 1. Active hostiles. Adaptive pattern engaged, Captain Rachel Sloan announced from her console. Through the massive screen, Leah's figure appeared. Small against the backdrop of chaos, her rifle raised, movements slow and deliberate. Briggs's voice cut through the silence. "She's too slow." Ethan Voss, still wearing his smug grin, added, "That's not cover, that's luck." The crowd laughed softly. A few officers exchanged knowing glances. "She's in over her head," one whispered. But Leah wasn't rushing. She moved corner to corner, scanning angles, calculating line of sight, each step deliberate. Her breathing remained controlled, the rhythm of someone who'd trained to survive panic. Inside the chamber, the holographic enemies materialized, faceless silhouettes wielding simulation rifles that fired real compressed kinetic rounds. The first volley struck inches from her shoulder. She rolled, returned 2 short bursts, and the targets disintegrated into blue light. Briggs muttered, "Beginner's luck." General Hensley said nothing. His eyes tracked her pattern, how she always moved diagonally, never twice through the same path. Her awareness wasn't reactionary, it was anticipatory. "Watch her hands," Captain Sloan murmured. "See that?" "What?" Briggs snapped. "She's not aiming where the enemies are," Sloan said. "She's aiming where they will be." The senator's aide scoffed. "Sounds poetic. Doesn't mean she can fight." But the AI adjusted itself, doubling hostility levels. 10 new hostiles spawned from multiple directions. Leah ducked behind cover, glancing once at the reflective surface of a cracked digital mirror, just enough to map her surroundings. Her lips moved slightly, whispering something no one could hear. A quiet count. 4 left, she murmured. The system responded with a hail of fire. She didn't flinch. She rolled to a low crouch, fired twice, shifted her stance, and fired again. Each shot a calculated correction from muscle memory that didn't belong to a standard infantry course. Briggs frowned. "What the hell kind of stance is that?" Hensley finally spoke. "That's not Army standard, that's something else." On screen, Leah sprinted through a collapsed building, glass shattering around her boots. She grabbed a simulation rifle from the ground enemy model and reconfigured it mid-run. Within seconds, it was operational. She used it to flank the remaining hostiles, clearing the field with textbook precision. The timer hit 4 minutes. The expected duration for this stage was 8. Captain Sloan's voice cracked slightly. "She just cut the average time in half," the crowd murmured. But before they could react, the simulator emitted a warning tone. Red lights flashed across every monitor. "System anomaly detected," the AI intoned. "What's going on?" Boyd demanded. "Drone calibration error," Sloan replied quickly, fingers flying across her console. "It's firing live suppressor rounds instead of blanks." The air in the control room shifted instantly. Those were training rounds designed for armored dummies, not human participants. "Shut it down," Boyd barked. "I can't," Sloan shouted. "It's locked in override." Inside the chamber, Leah heard the new sound, sharper, heavier. Real ammunition. She didn't freeze, didn't even hesitate. She moved. With stunning precision, she rolled behind a broken pillar, switched her weapon to burst mode, and began advancing, not retreating. "She's going toward them?" Voss exclaimed. The cameras struggled to keep up. Leah's form blurred between shadows, using every blind spot, every reflective surface, as if she'd memorized the map before stepping in. Bullets struck the walls around her, metal sparks, smoke, dust. The AI responded with adaptive pressure, increasing firepower. Yet Leah kept moving. Every action was a decision. Every movement a strategy. She flipped her rifle sideways to stabilize recoil, used a shattered table as a shield, and pushed forward until she was within 5 meters of the last drone. Then, silence. The drone fell, its optics flickering out. Inside the control room, the alarms still blared. Boyd barked into the comm. "Corporal Monroe, fall back." That's an order. Her reply came calm, steady. Negative, sir. Mission parameters incomplete. Sloane whispered under her breath. She's overriding the system manually. Hensley watched, motionless. Another wave spawned. 20 drones this time. The AI's voice announced, Threat escalation, level 5. Leah's breathing steadied. She dropped to one knee, adjusted the stock, and whispered, Equation reset. And then she moved faster than anyone thought humanly possible. Each motion flowed into the next pivot, fire, slide, reload, aim. There was no hesitation, no pause for effect, just rhythm. Calculated chaos. What would you have done if you were there? The narrator's voice asks quietly. Freeze or fight? The observers couldn't look away. Even the senator's aide, who'd mocked her earlier, leaned forward, eyes wide. Briggs's voice faltered. She's guessing. Sloane shook her head. No, Sergeant Major, she's predicting. And she was. The AI's predictive algorithm relied on human reaction times. Leah was breaking it, acting milliseconds before each threat registered. It was as if she'd trained against the system before. The simulation timer reached the 4-minute mark again. Leah's weapon overheated, sensors failing. Without hesitation, she grabbed the barrel with a gloved hand, ripped the malfunctioning receiver free, and tossed the weapon aside. The crowd gasped. She sprinted toward an enemy drone, dove under its line of fire, rolled behind it, and used the broken weapon's buttstock to crush its sensory core. Sparks exploded in a flash of light. Phase 2 complete, the AI announced flatly. Record time, 4 minutes, 27 seconds. The hangar fell silent. No one spoke. No one even breathed. Leah stood still in the simulated street, her chest rising and falling with quiet control. The bruise on her cheek caught the faint glow of the digital fires around her. Then she lowered her weapon. Up in the control booth, Voss broke the silence first. That can't be real. The system must be bugged. Briggs swallowed, staring at the timer. That's impossible. Hensley didn't look away from the screen. No, that's training. The silence deepened. No laughter now, no smirks. Just the sound of the cooling systems humming through the vents and the faint echo of a soldier inside the simulator lowering her rifle, alone and uncelebrated. When the chamber lights flicked back on, Leah's voice came over the comm, soft, almost detached. Simulation complete. Standing by for debrief, sir. The general straightened slowly. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, quietly, he said, Get me her file. Captain Sloane hesitated. Sir, her personnel file, Hensley repeated, now. She tapped through the encrypted interface. A red warning flashed. Access denied. Tier 1 clearance required. The general's eyes narrowed. Behind him, Briggs and Voss exchanged uneasy glances. Down in the chamber, Leah removed her helmet, tucking it under one arm. Her face was streaked with dust and sweat, but her expression stayed calm, detached from the storm she'd just walked through. Her eyes lifted toward the observation glass. She didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked straight through them. And for the first time, every man and woman in that hangar stopped laughing. They didn't yet understand who she was. But they knew, deep down, that they'd just witnessed something rare, the kind of calm that only comes from surviving what others never could. Silence lingered, heavy and uncomfortable. Disbelief remained, but so did something else, respect they weren't ready to admit. And somewhere in that silence, General Hensley whispered to himself, I've seen that stance before. Leah stepped out of the simulator into the harsh fluorescence of the debrief corridor, the door sealing behind her with a hydraulic sigh. Sweat traced pale streaks through the dust on her face. The right sleeve of her blouse had torn at the elbow, threads dangling like scraped wire. She removed the helmet and rested it against her hip. Her breathing slowed in measured counts. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. The cadence of a soldier who'd taught panic to wait its turn. A medic approached with a handheld light, then hesitated, reading the quiet permission in her eyes. Pupils equal and reactive, he murmured. You good, Corporal? I'm fine, she said. Save your kit for someone who needs it. As she reached to roll her sleeve back down, the fabric caught, revealing a mark on her forearm, a black falcon diving through a bar of shadow. The lines were clean, deliberately austere, the kind of ink done in places where the artist doesn't sign their name. General Hensley saw it from 15 feet away. One step, two steps, and he had the angle he needed. His face didn't change, but his shoulders went still. He'd seen that falcon before in a briefing that had ended with a burn bag and a room cleared of pens. He said nothing. Not yet. Sergeant Major Briggs cleared his throat and found his stride, boots striking a little harder than usual as he closed the distance. He arranged his face into the authority he wore when he needed it most, after he'd been wrong. "You got lucky, Corporal," he said, the consonants clipped. Leah's eyes lifted to him without heat. "Luck doesn't reload magazines, Sergeant Major." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The sentence traveled anyway, skittering along the corridor to the cluster of officers and analysts pretending not to listen. A few of them coughed into their fists. One lieutenant failed to hide his grin. Captain Rachel Sloane turned away from her console under the observation window, lips tugging in the tiniest smile that never reached her eyes. She busied herself with a cable that didn't need fixing. Briggs's jaw worked as if he were about to say something else, then decided against it. "Debrief in 10, he muttered and walked past. Hensley waited for the corridor to settle to a low murmur before he spoke. "Corporal Monroe," she straightened. "Sir," he gestured to the bench tucked against the wall. "Take a seat if you need one." "I don't, sir." He nodded once, reading the truth in the evenness of her tone, then looked up to the observation deck. "Colonel Boyd, my office, Captain Sloane, with us." The three of them crossed into the glass-walled control room that overlooked the corridor like a watchtower. The door thumped shut, and the noise outside dulled to a cotton mutter. Sloane brought the debrief feed onto the central screen. Metrics scrolled in columns, heart rate variance, decision latency, accuracy deltas under stress. They made pretty lines and undeniable arguments. "Show me her personnel," Hensley said. "Sir, that's," Boyd began. "Now." Sloane's fingers pattered across the keys. The terminal blinked, requested his credentials, and then flashed a practiced red. ACCESS, Denied E. Restricted Clearance, Tier 1. Hensley leaned closer, reading the line twice. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Again. Sloane tried a different route. Same red, same message. On the third attempt, the terminal offered a compromise, a header with nothing underneath. Name, Monroe, Leah A., and a block of black rectangle where details should have been. Boyd exhaled through his nose. "Technical glitch." Sloane shook her head. "No glitch. This is vault-locked." "Tiers," Hensley said softly, as if reminding the room of gravity. "We put them there for a reason." Down below, the corridor had grown more crowded. Ethan Voss hovered among the uniforms like a tourist who'd lost his map. His voice, high with irritation, cut through the murmur. "This is reckless realism. If you wanted a publicity stunt, you should have put her on a treadmill and called it resilience." "Sir," an analyst tried, "the live fire anomaly was a system." Voss lifted a hand. "Save it." She walked into a room designed to flatter her and came out looking like a hero. That's theater. The door to the control room opened and Hensley stepped out before anyone else could. He didn't raise his volume, only his presence. "Son, I've seen rookies freeze under less pressure than she just held." That wasn't programming. That was training. Voss's mouth opened, then closed. He shifted his weight, seeking the safe harbor of indignation and finding none. "General, with respect." "With respect," Hensley repeated, and somehow the phrase didn't ask for it, it commanded it. "Stand down." Voss stood down. Leah replaced the helmet on the bench and rubbed the cloth of her sleeve over the Cordura scuff on her shoulder, a small, practical motion. It occurred to Sloane that Leah polished gear the way some people say prayers. "Corporal," Sloane said as she came to stand beside her, "you aware of the anomaly during Phase 2? "Yes, ma'am." No complaint, no condemnation, just acknowledgement. "What clued you?" "Sound first. weight of impact next. Leah tapped 2 fingers against the bench, a light rap, then a heavier one. The drone recoil shifted. Sloane's eyebrows lifted despite herself. You felt recoil through a wall. I felt what was different, Leah said. Difference is where decisions live. Sloane filed the sentence away. Some lines weren't poetical. They were field knives, simple, sharp, and used only when necessary. Briggs had composed himself into something that looked like leadership again. He checked his watch, then the corridor clock, and found the authority of a schedule. All right. Debrief in 5. Let's keep the grandstanding for the hill. No one laughed. The word hill felt small in a building that had just held its breath. Hensley re-entered the control room and closed the door with deliberate care. He did not sit. Captain, give me what the system will give. I want every observable not protected by statute. Sloane nodded. Copy. She brought up the sim telemetry, overlaying movement paths with predicted AI behavior. The lines diverged over and over. Leah had slipped between the algorithm's expectations, the way water finds the one seam in stone. See here? Sloane traced a sequence with her finger. She anticipates, not the first move. The third, she gives the machine what it expects once, then changes rule sets. It chases her into an ambush it believes it set. Boyd frowned. That's not in any of our training syllabi. No, Sloane said. It isn't. Hensley's silence sharpened. He remembered a briefing room with the blinds drawn and a single binder stamped with a falcon in negative space. A unit built to argue with inevitability and win. He didn't say the word. He didn't need to. The old word set itself inside his head. Spectre. Outside, the soundscape shifted. Laughter had bled out of the corridor an age ago, replaced by a denser thing. Curiosity trying not to sound like respect. 2 soldiers walked past Leah and stopped as if compelled by gravity. One cleared his throat. Ma'am, those turns you took at the east choke, how'd you keep the drones from triangulating? Leah looked at him, decided he was asking to learn, not to flatter. Never give them parallel data, she said. Choose odd angles, never 90. Starve the geometry. The soldier nodded, filing it away with the reverence of someone who had just been given a tool, not a compliment. Briggs watched, expression neutral. He was the kind of man who hated being wrong and refused to hate the person who proved it. The difference was its own kind of courage. Ethan Voss drifted back like a tide, unable to disappear, unable to contribute. So we're all just ignoring the fact she could have been killed, he said, volume sneaking back into his voice. That's the headline I'm taking. Army gambles on soldier's life. Hensley turned from the glass. We plan for risk. We do not gamble with lives. His eyes didn't soften. And if your headline needs a verb stronger than learned, you're not ready to write about soldiers. Voss swallowed and retreated another step, pen clicking uselessly. In the control room, the denial banner still glowed at the edge of the screen like a stubborn bruise. Restricted clearance, Tier 1. The phrase gnawed at Hensley not because it refused him, but because it explained too much. It explained the stance. The calm. The falcon ink. It explained why she moved as if every hallway owned a second exit. He pressed his thumb against the desk, considering the shape of a decision. There were ways to peel back a layer without ripping the whole seal. He knew them. He had used them before when the mission required clarity over comfort. Captain, he said, flag this anomaly for Inspector General review. Separate from the sim performance, I'll sign the memo. Sloane hesitated. Sir, that'll pull attention. It already has attention, he said. I intend to give it a chain of custody. Down below, Leah stood when the debrief door opened. She didn't take the water offered. She didn't want her hands occupied. The small notebook was still in her pocket, the one that read, Targets aren't enemies, they're equations. She had never needed to look at the cover to remember the line. Briggs paused in the doorway, measuring a sentence he would have mocked this morning. He settled for the one that fit. Inside, Corporal. Yes, Sergeant Major. They passed within arm's reach. His eyes flicked once to the tattoo, then back to hers. If he recognized the image, he didn't show it. Recognition wasn't his lane. His lane was consequence. In the debrief room, the air felt colder, conditioned not for comfort but for wakefulness. A single camera watched from the corner. The recorder light pulsed low, a metronome for honesty. Boyd began with procedure. State your name, rank, and unit. Corporal Leah A. Monroe. Echo Company, 2505th. Walk us through your decision at T plus 1 minute 22 seconds, he said, when the drones shifted to suppressive. Leah described her weight transfer before her shot, the way the sound sharpened, the calculus that happens where there is no paper. She didn't glorify it, she didn't diminish it. She reported. Sloan asked about the overheated receiver. Leah laid the failed part on the table, pointing to the hairline fracture that most eyes wouldn't find. Catastrophic in 10 rounds, she said. I chose 0. Hensley stood in the doorway and let the room run until it proved it knew how to listen. Then he stepped forward. His voice was even. Corporal, who taught you to starve geometry? She met his gaze for the first time in the debrief. Something thoughtful moved behind her eyes. Sir, the lesson was written by the problem. He held her look a second longer than courtesy required, then nodded once, both answer and acknowledgement. When they released her, the hallway had thinned. End-of-day fatigue softened the angles of faces, but the new element remained, a restraint around the jokes, a caution that hadn't been there an hour ago. Curiosity had earned a chair at the table where ridicule once sat alone. Leah retrieved her helmet and tucked it beneath her arm. As she stepped into the main bay, the reflection on the observation glass caught the Falcon ink again, just for a heartbeat. Hensley, 3 rooms away, could have sworn the mark moved with the pulse in her wrist, as if ready to take flight. He looked back at the red banner on the screen. Tier 1, and the ache behind his ribs shifted from irritation to certainty. He didn't have the full truth yet. But the outline was there, the way a map appears when you stop looking for roads and start looking for rivers. No one said her name with reverence. No one dared it yet, but the corridor was different now. The air carried a question instead of a joke. They still didn't know who she really was. Yet, the second test wasn't supposed to happen. After the chaos of the first trial, the Omega Protocol should have been shut down for system analysis. But bureaucratic pride runs faster than safety reports, and Colonel Boyd wanted a clean data run before the visiting senators left the base. By dusk, the hangar buzzed again. Technicians rechecked panels, cables, and power cores, while Leah stood quietly near the simulator door, helmet tucked under one arm. Her uniform had been hastily patched, the tear on her elbow now stitched but visible like a scar that refused to hide. Captain Sloan walked past with a nervous glance. System should hold this time, she said, though her voice betrayed the words. Leah nodded once. Should. When the lights dimmed, a faint metallic hum rose from beneath the deck, the Omega's AI rebooting into standby mode. The technicians called out readiness reports, but one voice cracked over the intercom. Power fluctuation on grid 3, repeating spike in frequency. Boyd barked, stabilize it. But before anyone could act, the entire system pulsed, lights flashing, drones lifting slightly from their racks, and then everything went dark. And then everything went dark. A second later, emergency lights snapped on, red and stuttering. Smoke curled from the main console. Power surge, Sloan shouted. Main breaker fused, control lockout, seal the room, Boyd ordered instinctively. But the surge had already done the job. The simulator door clamped shut, locking Leah and one technician inside. On the other side, General Hensley's voice cut through the comm. Monroe, sit rep. Static. Inside the chamber, the technician coughed, waving smoke away. System, just reset itself, he rasped. AI's rebooting. Leah's visor flickered with lines of code, then a message scrolled across her display. Hostile override. Active. She didn't hesitate. Get behind me. What? Behind me, she repeated, calm, sharp. The drones along the ceiling reactivated, optics glowing crimson. What was supposed to be a holographic drill now hummed with the unmistakable pitch of real weapon systems. In the control room, Sloane's monitors lit up with error codes. "Sir, the AI's gone autonomous. It's running a live combat fail-safe." "Cut the feed," Boyd yelled. "I can't." The first drone fired. The sound was wrong, heavier, lethal. Leah shoved the technician behind a barrier, pivoting in one fluid motion. The blast chewed through the floor where they'd stood seconds before. Outside, chaos erupted. "Security, override the lock now." But inside, Leah had already moved. She ducked low, grabbed the broken receiver from a nearby weapon rack, and used it as an improvised club. A second drone swooped. She struck upward, catching it at the base of its rotor, spinning into its blind spot before it could stabilize. The technician gasped. How do you know where to hit?" She didn't answer. She was already moving toward the next one. Her motions weren't random, they were doctrine. Not the kind found in manuals, but the kind forged in places no map acknowledged. Each turn was precise. Each step measured. Her breathing never spiked above rhythm. In the control room, Hensley leaned forward, eyes wide. "That's Spectre movement." Boyd frowned. "Sir, she's not reacting, she's controlling the rhythm. Every engagement is preemptive." "That's Ghost Protocol doctrine, Spectre level." "You're saying she's one of them?" Boyd's voice faltered. "Spectre was shut down 12 years ago," Hensley said quietly. "No one's trained like that since." Another explosion rocked the simulator. Sparks showered from the ceiling as Leah sprinted across the chamber, dragging the technician toward a support beam. "Stay here," she ordered. "Cover your head." "You're going after it?" Leah's expression didn't change. "I'm finishing it." She vaulted onto a storage platform, ripped open a junction box, and tore a wire free. Electricity arced between her gloves as she looped the cable around a metal rod. "Improvised EMP," she muttered. 50 volts should drop one drone. "Wait! You can't!" But she already had. The drone swooped in low, rotors screaming. She threw the live wire at the last second. It wrapped around the drone's chassis, and the burst of static dropped it midair. The technician stared, stunned. Outside, alarms blared. Sloane yelled over the noise. "We've got heat spikes inside the chamber." She's shorting circuits manually. "Override that door," Hensley barked. "We're trying." For a moment, nothing but static filled the comms. Then Leah's voice cut through, calm as stone. "2 remaining. I'll draw them to the east corner. Tell your men to open on my mark." Boyd blinked. "She's giving orders now?" "No," Hensley said softly. "She's saving your men's lives." Inside, Leah sprinted across the floor, bullets sparking behind her. She slid behind a crate, grabbed a metal plate, and used it as a makeshift shield. The last drone descended, scanning for targets. She waited for the hum, the subtle change that marked its reload cycle, and then rose in one smooth motion, swinging the plate like a bat. The impact echoed like thunder. The drone shattered against the wall, pieces scattering across the chamber. "Now!" she shouted. Sloane slammed the override. The locks disengaged. The door burst open as security stormed in, rifles raised, eyes wide. Leah stepped out first, smoke curling behind her. In her arms, the technician, unharmed though pale as ash. The hangar fell silent. For a moment, no one knew what to do. Leah laid the technician gently on a stretcher, straightened, and looked toward the observation deck. Her face was calm, expression unreadable. Briggs stood at the front of the crowd, speechless for once. Someone finally asked the question everyone was thinking. "Where'd you learn that, Corporal?" Leah's eyes met theirs. Her answer was quiet, almost lost in the static-filled air. "In places that don't exist on maps." No one spoke after that. General Hensley stepped closer to the glass, his reflection ghosting over her figure. Every muscle in his body told him to salute. Every instinct told him he was staring at something the Army had buried long ago. Briggs turned toward Captain Sloane. "What the hell was that?" Sloane swallowed. "That," she said softly, "was survival training, at a level none of us were cleared to read about." Down in the hangar, soldiers began murmuring. One voice whispered the word that hadn't been spoken in over a decade. Spectre. Another picked it up. Spectre unit? Within minutes, it was everywhere, echoing off the steel walls, crossing ranks and corridors like a rumor, too wild to be true and too specific to be false. Boss appeared at the edge of the crowd, his arrogance finally cracked. "Is that even real?" he demanded. "I thought Spectre was a myth." Hensley didn't look away from the woman standing below. "Most myths start with something real," he said quietly. Leah wiped soot from her face with the back of her glove, the faint falcon tattoo visible again, darker now against the sweat and grime. The emblem of a ghost that wasn't supposed to exist. Sloane whispered, almost to herself. She shouldn't know that doctrine unless, Hensley finished it for her, unless she was trained in it. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Outside, the sun dipped low, throwing long bars of gold through the hangar windows. The smoke began to clear, leaving behind the faint hum of cooling systems and the steady rhythm of Leah's breathing. The technician she'd saved sat up slowly, staring at her in disbelief. "You knew exactly what they'd do, how they'd move." Leah gave the smallest nod. "That's what they taught us." "Who's they?" Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed even. "People who don't get thanked in ceremonies." When she turned to walk away, the crowd parted without a word. Even Briggs, who had mocked her hours ago, stepped aside. Hensley's hand hovered near his cap, wanting to salute, but stopping himself. Not yet. Not until he knew for sure. He watched her leave through the smoke, the outline of her figure fading like the ghost her codename once promised. And though no one dared to say it aloud again, the word lingered on every mind in that hangar. Spectre. Night fell hard over Meridian, the desert swallowing daylight in a single quiet breath. Inside the command office, the glass walls turned into mirrors, throwing the room's fluorescent light back at the men and women who hadn't yet found words. The air smelled like overheated circuits and cold coffee, a scent that clung to long days and decisions people carry home in their bones. General Robert Hensley stood in front of the terminal, shoulders squared, as if the machine across from him wore rank. The access screen pulsed with a stubborn red banner that had denied him all afternoon. On the sill behind him, a thin line of dust glowed in the lamplight, untouched by hands that had learned patience the hard way. "Try it again," he said. Captain Rachel Sloane didn't move to argue. She slid into the chair, fingers flying, stepping through credential hoops most officers didn't know existed. The system demanded more, then more again, as if daring the room to prove it deserved the truth it was asking for. Colonel Travis Boyd hovered near the door, trying to look useful. "General, if the Inspector General audits this, we'll need the truth," Hensley said, not unkindly, not softly. "We'll start there." The first barrier fell with a muted chirp. The second flashed a warning and then softened. The third hesitated like a held breath. Sloane's hands paused over the keys. "Sir, last gate." "Proceed," Hensley said. She pressed the sequence. The red screen flickered. Pixel by pixel, the color bled to amber, then to a cool government green. Lines of text resolved, black and unadorned. Name, Monroe, Lee AA rank, Corporal Unit, Task Force Codename, Spectre. No biography. No medals. No list of deployments or commendations. Just the bones of a person the Army had tried to draw in invisible ink. The words hit the room like artillery. No one spoke. Even the cooling fan in the corner sounded like it had stuck for a second, catching on the shape of what had just been said without being said. Sergeant Major Cole Briggs was halfway through a breath he didn't finish. The last time he'd been this quiet was kneeling in a field clinic with his hand over a private's wound, bargaining silently with a god he only visited under fluorescent light. He stared at the screen as if it might blink and become a joke. Boyd swallowed. His face had gone pale enough to match the walls. He didn't ask for context. He didn't need any. Sloane blew air through her teeth and leaned back, eyes tracing the 4 lines again. "Well," she said softly, "there it is." Hensley didn't move. He read the name once more, slower this time, letting the shape of it soak through the years between that old binder and this room. He had suspected. He hadn't expected to feel his chest ache when he saw it written plain. "Bring her in," he said. The door opened with a hush, and Leah Monroe stepped inside as if the floor could shift without warning. She closed the door behind her and stood at ease, helmet tucked in the crook of her arm. The bruise on her cheek had deepened into a colder color under the office lights. She had washed the soot from her hands. She had not tried to explain. "Corporal," Hensley said, voice steady out of respect for the moment. "Thank you for coming." "Sir," she answered. He turned the monitor so the text faced her. He didn't try to soften it. He didn't preface it with ceremony. He let the truth do its own work. Her gaze flicked to the screen. No flicker of surprise. No smile. No shame. Only that sane quiet he had seen through glass and smoke. He felt his voice thin at the edges, a crack working its way up through 40 years of rank and habit. "Your Spectre?" A breath. Not a pause. A courtesy given to a man who had earned one. "Yes, sir," Leah said. "I was." The word was carried more weight than some medals. Sloan felt it. Boyd felt it. Briggs felt it most, though he couldn't have said why. "That program was shut down," Boyd said. Not as accusation, not as question, but the bewildered whisper of a man who'd believed he knew the edges of his own profession. Leah didn't look at him. "Programs change names," she said. "Missions don't." Hensley's eyes didn't leave her face. "The Crucible?" She gave a single, small nod. "Final phase. Live roll, foreign terrain. No cameras, no applause." Briggs found his voice and hated the sound of it. "Those bruises," he said, even though he knew. "They're from preparation, Sergeant Major," Leah said gently, rescuing him from the rest of the sentence. Nothing more. The room rebalanced around that answer. The ugliness of earlier jokes had nowhere to stand. The words people had thrown at her in the hangar drifted back into their throats where they burned and belonged. Hensley straightened, the ache behind his ribs turning into something that felt like relief and responsibility all at once. "Corporal," he said, "you saved a technician's life today. You stabilized a hostile override. You prevented a security team from walking into a kill box, and you did it with improvised tools and doctrine that doesn't exist on paper." Leah's chin lifted a fraction, not in pride. In acknowledgement of truth, spoken clean. "I serve where I'm needed, sir." "You do," Hensley said. "And you did." Sloan looked from the screen to Leah and back again, the weight of her own work reordering itself in her mind. "We built an AI to outpace human decisions," she said quietly. "You made it late to its own fight." Leah's mouth twitched at one corner, the closest thing to a smile anyone in the room had seen. "It learned my first move," she said. "I stopped offering it the second." Briggs exhaled through his nose, a sound almost like a laugh if shame had a sense of humor. He squared his shoulders and took the single hardest step a proud man can take. "Corporal," he said, voice rough, "my words earlier were out of line." Leah met his eyes without the thrill of victory. "Acknowledged," she said. "We all have different missions." He nodded once, almost a bow. "Thank you," he said, "for more than one thing." Outside the office, the base kept moving because that's what bases do, even when their center shifts. News doesn't need a PA system in a place like Meridian. It travels on backs of glances and halfway finished sentences. Task Force Ghost. Spectre. The words collected in corners and mess halls, repeated with the small reverence soldiers reserve for those who carried weight in the dark without asking anyone to hold their end. Hensley stepped to the window and looked down into the hangar. The smoke had finally cleared. The simulator bay sat quiet, a gutted beast cooling after the hunt. Personnel walked the perimeter in pairs, heads bent together, voices tamped down by something like awe. He turned back to Leah. "This will ripple," he said. "You understand that." "I do, sir." "I'll contain what needs containing," he said. "I won't bury what needs honoring." "Thank you," she said, and meant it. Boyd rubbed a hand across his jaw, the lines of rank and ambition sliding around each other like gears in need of oil. "General, the Hill will call. The press will sniff this like blood. If Spectre's name floats to the surface, it won't," Hensley said. "Not because we're hiding shame, Because we don't spend legends as if we can mint more. Leah's gaze drifted to the corner of the desk where a map of the training ranges lay folded. She didn't reach for it. It's over now, she said softly. I serve where I'm needed. The sentence landed with the gravity of oath and release. Sloane felt something inside her steady. Briggs' shoulders lowered a half-inch, like a man who'd been holding an apology for years he didn't know he owed. Hensley stepped around the desk. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't close the distance the way civilians do when they want to share proximity to courage. He gave her space and something rarer. Corporal Monroe, he said, and the title sat clean in the air. On behalf of this command, and for myself, I acknowledge what you've done and what you've carried. You will not have to explain yourself to anyone in this building again. Yes, sir, she said. He took off his cap and set it on the desk, an old habit before speaking straight. When I was a captain, he said, I saw a man hold a line no one believed could be held. Years later, I learned his name from a redacted after-action report and a memory that wouldn't let me sleep. Today feels like that. Leah said nothing. Some gratitude is accepted by standing still. Outside the office, footsteps approached and passed, muffled by carpet and the hush that follows revelation. Somebody laughed 2 corridors away and stopped, as if remembering they were in a place where laughter needed permission. Hensley nodded toward the door. You're dismissed, Corporal. She turned to go, then hesitated. Sir? Yes. The technician, she said. Was he cleared by medical? He's fine, Sloane answered, quick to relieve the lingering thread. Bruised pride, good vitals. Good, Leah said. She touched the helmet with her fingers, almost absent-mindedly, then tucked it tighter against her side. Permission to return to duty. Granted, Hensley said. Captain Sloane will coordinate after action with you at 0700. Leah inclined her head. Roger. She opened the door and stepped into the corridor. The conversation outside stuttered and resumed, the way a room does when a storm opens the door to check the windows. She moved through it without drawing attention and drew all of it anyway. Inside the office, no one spoke for a long moment. The green on the monitor glowed like a night vision horizon, truth rendered in backlit shorthand. Briggs cleared his throat. Sir, he said to Hensley, if I may, go ahead. I've trained a lot of fine soldiers, he said, the admission sanded smooth by humility, and I have seen fear dress itself up as confidence more times than I care to count. Today, I saw the opposite. Hensley nodded. So did I. Sloane closed the file. The screen obeyed, returning to a neutral login as if nothing remarkable had happened in front of it. She knew better. Machines forget on command. People shouldn't. The office quieted further as the base settled into night rhythms. Distant generators, a radio murmuring at low volume, the click of a thermostat deciding the temperature of a room where nobody had noticed the cold. Word spread, not because anyone tried to spread it, but because truth doesn't know how to sit still. In the mess, a private who'd snickered that morning stared into his tray and thought about the sentence he'd heard in the hallway. Luck doesn't reload magazines. In the motor pool, 2 sergeants argued doctrine until they realized they were both arguing for the same thing. In the barracks, a young specialist traced the outline of a bird he'd glimpsed on a forearm and wondered what it meant to carry something that didn't want to be seen. Silence reigned, not the uneasy quiet of fear, but the dignified hush that follows after a room recognizes it stood too close to something sacred and almost spoke out of turn. In the command office, Hensley rested his palms on the desk, head bowed for 1 heartbeat longer than necessary. Then he straightened, put his cap back on, and turned to the window again. The hangar's lights were softer now. For the first time all day, the building looked its size. Spectre, he said, letting the word exist where it belonged, between respect and responsibility. Sloane glanced at him. Sir? He shook his head gently. Nothing. Just remembering. He watched the corridor until Leah was gone from view and the glass returned to reflecting only the room. The truth was unlocked now. The weight of it had settled where it should, in the hands of people who would carry it without telling the world a story it hadn't earned. Somewhere below, a door closed, and the sound echoed up through the vents like a period placed carefully at the end of a sentence that will be read again in quieter rooms. It was over now, as she'd said. She would serve where she was needed. The hangar was still half asleep when the doors rolled open again, dawn spilling through like a slow confession. Rows of drones sat in their cradles, lifeless now, black shells cooled and silent. The metal floor gleamed from the night crews mopping every scrape polished away except the scorched arcs where chaos had written itself only hours earlier. General Robert Hensley stood at the top of the observation deck, looking down. The crowd below wasn't assembled by order. It had gathered itself, drawn by the rumor that had burned through Meridian faster than radio chatter. Spectre. The word still echoed in corridors, whispered in disbelief. Leah Monroe was already there. She stood near the center of the hangar, in full uniform this time, her posture perfectly still. The bruises had faded slightly under the harsh light, but they were visible enough to remind every eye present that courage often wore scars instead of medals. The sound of the general's boots carried like gunfire as he descended the metal stairs, each step measured, heavy, deliberate. No one moved, no one dared. By the time he reached the hangar floor, silence had fully claimed the space. The technicians froze mid-task. The chatter that usually filled the mornings was gone, replaced by the low hum of generators and the faint clink of his metals as he walked. He stopped in front of Leah. For a heartbeat, they just looked at each other, a 4-star general and a corporal, two lives divided by rank, united by something older and harder to name. Then, slowly, firmly, Hensley raised his right hand. The salute cut through the hangar like a clean blade. No ceremony, no announcement. Just a gesture that still carried weight in a world that had forgotten what it meant. "It's been 40 years since I've seen a soldier move like that," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but every word landed like a declaration. "You just reminded this army what quiet strength looks like." The silence deepened. Leah didn't blink. She stood straighter, eyes steady, not out of pride but respect. All around them, soldiers began to rise. Mechanics in coveralls. Medics. Clerks. Infantrymen. One by one, they stood and mirrored the gesture. A sea of hands lifted in unison, a wave of steel-straight salutes that rolled through the hangar until there was no one left seated. Even Sergeant Major Briggs, his earlier arrogance burned away, stood rigid, jaw tight, eyes low. The salute he gave wasn't mechanical. It was apology turned into respect. Ethan Voss, the senator's aide, lingered near the back, face drained of color. He had come for a demonstration, a headline, a photo opportunity. Now he could barely look at her. His notes trembled in his hand as realization took hold. He hadn't just mocked a soldier. He had mocked a living legend. Hensley lowered his salute. "You've carried something most of us only read about," he said quietly, "and you carried it alone." Leah's reply was steady. "Not alone, sir. Just unseen." Something in that word cracked through every man and woman within earshot. Unseen. The word hung in the air like a mirror turned toward them all. The reminder that there were warriors who fought without glory, who came home without ceremony, who bled for missions that never made reports. The general nodded. "Then it's time they see you." Leah shook her head. "With respect, sir, that's not why we do it." Her tone wasn't defiant. It was honest. Simple. "Just doing my duty, sir." The way she said it, soft, unpretentious, made the entire hangar go still again. Up in the observation deck, Captain Sloan exhaled through a trembling smile. Boyd rubbed his temples as if trying to absorb what humility looked like. Even the younger privates stared at Leah like they were memorizing a face they'd only hear about later. Hensley's voice softened. "The world won't know this happened," he said, "and maybe that's right. But every man and woman in this room will remember what they saw today." "Yes, sir." The hum of the hangar returned slowly, respectful, quiet. Someone in the back started clapping, then stopped, realizing applause didn't belong here. This wasn't a victory. It was recognition. Hensley looked around. "At ease," he said finally. The command broke the stillness like a sigh. Hands dropped. Conversations murmured back to life. But the weight of the moment lingered, etched into every gaze. Briggs stepped forward hesitantly, cap in hand. "Corporal Monroe," he said, voice low, "for what it's worth, thank you." "For the reminder." Leah gave him a faint nod. "We all need reminders, Sergeant Major." He managed a small smile and stepped back into the crowd. As the formation began to disperse, Hensley turned once more to Leah. "You're officially reinstated to full operational status," he said. "But I imagine your work here is done." Leah looked toward the open hangar doors, the desert stretching beyond. The wind carried the faintest scent of rain, rare in that part of the world. "Yes, sir," she said. "Mission complete." He extended his hand. Not as a general, but as a soldier. She shook it once, firm, brief. "Where will you go?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Wherever I'm needed, sir." With that, she turned and began walking toward the light pouring through the hangar doors. Every head turned to watch. The sound of her boots echoed across the floor, slow, steady, final. Outside, the sun broke over the horizon, painting the desert gold. The light caught her uniform, outlining her in the glow of morning. The falcon tattoo on her forearm, barely visible beneath her rolled sleeve, seemed to shimmer for a heartbeat before fading again into shadow. And as she crossed into the open air, General Hensley spoke one last time, more to himself than to anyone else. "Spectre," he whispered. We almost forgot what that meant. The camera of imagination would hold there, a bruised face turned toward the dawn, a silent base full of humbled men and women. A salute still hanging in the air, long after it ended. No music. No applause, just reverence. Because some legends don't announce themselves. They walk quietly through the smoke, carrying the weight of what they've done, and vanish back into the ranks, leaving the world just a little more awake than before. Evening settled over Meridian like a slow exhale. The desert turned gold first, then rust, then violet as the light bled away across the ridgelines. The hangar lights flickered on one by one, humming in rhythm with the generators. Somewhere in the distance, a convoy rolled out, engines low, voices fading into the wind. Leah Monroe sat alone near the edge of the tarmac, a wooden crate beneath her, and the day's heat still clinging to the metal at her back. Her rifle rested across her knees, the cleaning kit open beside her boots. She worked in quiet rhythm. Oil, cloth, chamber, slide, movements as natural as breathing. For the first time all day, no one was watching her. And she preferred it that way. Her hands were steady, the faint bruises on her forearm catching the last strips of amber light. The falcon tattoo, the mark that had sparked so many whispers, was half hidden under her sleeve. It didn't need to be seen. It had never been for show. She paused only once, glancing toward the horizon where the sky and sand met like two soldiers shaking hands at dusk. Then she went back to her work. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. The sound of those boots, heavy, deliberate, measured by years of command, belonged to Sergeant Major Cole Briggs. He stopped a few feet away, clearing his throat softly. "Corporal." Leah didn't look up right away. She finished the motion she was in, wiping down the bolt carrier, and then rested the weapon across her lap. "Sergeant Major." His voice carried the rough edge of a man who'd spent the afternoon replaying his own words. "I was wrong," he said simply, "about you." "About what strength looks like." Leah's eyes met his. No anger. No pride. Just quiet acknowledgement. She gave a small nod. "The mission continues, Sergeant Major." "That's all that matters." Briggs drew a slow breath. "You really believe that?" "I have to," she said. "Otherwise, everything we've done just becomes noise." He studied her face for a moment. The calm, the steadiness, the absence of bitterness. She wasn't asking for understanding. She wasn't asking for anything. And that, somehow, humbled him more than all her skill ever could. He straightened his spine, heels clicking together. Then, without hesitation, he raised his hand in a crisp salute. Not as an officer to a subordinate, but soldier to soldier. Leah stood in return, acknowledging the gesture with a quiet nod before lowering her gaze back to her rifle. Briggs turned and walked away, the gravel crunching under his boots. When he was gone, the silence returned, deep, wide, and alive with memory. The narrator's voice took the place of the wind, low and reflective. Sometimes, the strongest warriors are the ones who say the least. They don't seek recognition. They don't demand applause. They just keep moving forward, carrying the mission even when no one's left to see it. Leah clicked the final piece into place, locked the bolt, and ran one last patch through the barrel. The weapon gleamed faintly in the dying light. In the distance, the American flag over the base shifted in the breeze, edges frayed, colors muted by dust, but still flying. Always flying. She looked at it for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she packed her kit, slung the rifle over her shoulder, and started toward the barracks. The wind caught her hair, lifting it slightly as she walked. One last flicker of motion before the desert swallowed her silhouette. The voice returned, softer now. They are the quiet professionals. The ones who carry the burden, make the hard calls, and fade into silence when the work is done. Because real strength doesn't shout, it endures. The last light disappeared behind the mountains, and the base settled into the hush of evening. Somewhere inside that silence, a single truth remained. Steady, grounded, unbroken, the mission continues. And that, as Leah Monroe would say, was all that mattered. Never judge a warrior by appearance. The quietest soldier may carry the loudest legend. Corporal Leah Monroe reminded us all that true strength isn't measured by size, voice, or rank. It's measured by calm in the face of chaos, and by the courage to keep serving even when no one is watching. If you were moved by her story, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories for more true tales of honor, sacrifice, and courage that define our heroes. And to every silent professional out there, every veteran, every soldier still standing watch under the same flag, we see you, we thank you, and above all, we salute you.